Hi everybody, welcome to the next instalment of the Master and Margarita read-along, slow read, which I'm doing here on my channel, camscampbellreads.substack.com. This will be going out on Substack, as I've just stated, also on YouTube, which you might know because you might be watching this, or you might even be listening to it as a podcast, because I'm putting it out in 3 different ways to give you choices, dear reader. So today we are looking at chapters 23 to 25 and we're going to Satan's Ball. You excited for that? Right. So I'm going to be sharing some artwork as well, which you'll see on the video or on the Substack post. Obviously you won't see it on the podcast. So if you want to see the artwork, and some of it's brilliant by the way, that's where you can do that. And this will take us up to the 3/4 point, which leaves only another 2 instalments before we finish the novel. So, isn't it exciting? So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out what I've written, maybe ad-lib a little bit, and you might get to watch me in real time correcting some typos, and you might hear the dog bark. So, we'll see. There she goes. Did you hear that? Right. Welcome to the 6th instalment of our slow read of the Master and Margarita. We're reading just 3 chapters this week, starting out with the famous Satan's Ball. Expect to be dazzled with the enormity of it all. I've included a few images as always and have preferred Gennady Kalinovsky's watercolours in this instalment. He received the Grand Prix at the Book of the Year competition in 2002 for his paintings of the Master and Margarita. You can view more of his artwork over at bulgakovart.com. Follow me, reader! Za mной, читатель! And there's a print and read offline option, so you can download a PDF of the essay and read it at your leisure. I have removed the images from that one, so you'll save ink if you decide to print it out. That gives you the chance of taking it down the beach or off to the park or wherever you want. Chapter 23, Satan's Grand Ball. Midnight was approaching. They had to hurry. Margarita is washed in blood, then polished with leaves. She has shoes made of rose petals with gold buckles and a crown of diamonds. Koroviev dresses her in a heavy chain with the effigy of a black poodle in an oval frame. Remember that Voland had a poodle's head on his cane, reminiscent of Faust. Koroviev gives Margarita instructions on being a good hostess. Smile at everyone, don't miss anyone out, and don't show any disdain towards anyone. Behemoth gives the call for the ball to begin, and Margarita is magically transported to, or stands still while the space around her is transformed into, a ballroom. Koroviev instructs Margarita how to greet the orchestra and its conductor, who is none other than the Waltz King himself, Johann Strauss. And we've got an image here. It's just delightful. I won't describe it for you. You're better going to look at it. But this is the caption that goes with it. Margarita was set in place, and a low amethyst column was under her left hand. You can rest your hand on it if it becomes too difficult, Koroviev whispered. Margarita tried to look around. Koroviev and Azazello were sitting beside her in parade poses. Next to Azazello were 3 more young men who vaguely reminded Margarita of Abaddon. So that's obviously a quotation from the novel, and that's what this scene here is depicting. We get more description of the ballroom. It's magical and sumptuous and gargantuan. Margarita asks where all the guests are. Koroviev replies, quote, "They'll be here, my queen. They'll be here. They'll be here soon. There will be no shortage of them. And truly, I'd prefer to be chopping firewood rather than receiving them here on this landing." End quote. The guests begin to arrive at the stroke of midnight. The first is Monsieur Jacques, circa 1400 to 56, French financier and merchant, accused of poisoning Agnes Sorel, 1422 to 1450, mistress of Charles VII of France, 1403 to 61, and his wife. They arrive via the enormous fireplace in a state of decay, he on a gibbet and she in a coffin, and are then revived into ballroom finery. Well, ballroom finery in a sense. She's wearing heels and black plumes on her head, but is otherwise naked. The guests continue to arrive, each one having committed a crime more heinous than the last. Perhaps a message from Bulgakov that crime doesn't pay? Quote, "And what's that on her leg?" asked Margarita, tirelessly offering her hand to the guests who had overtaken the hobbling Signora Tofana. "And why that green thing on her neck? A withered neck?" "I'm enchanted, Prince," cried Karoviev, and at the same time whispered to Margarita, "A beautiful neck, but something unpleasant happened to her in prison. On her leg, my queen, is a Spanish boot, and this is why there's the ribbon. When the jailers learnt that around 500 poorly chosen husbands had left Naples and Palermo forever, in the heat of the moment they strangled Signora Tofana in prison." End quote. A Spanish boot was an instrument of torture designed to crush the foot or leg. And I've got an image here showing a drawing of a Spanish boot. Quite a horrendous piece of apparatus. The stream of guests continues and Karoviev introduces them. Margarita begins to tire and feels sore as her knee is kissed by the passing guests. Only after 3 hours does the stream begin to thin. The last guests arrive. Quote, "The last guests arrive, and Willow's at the door." Or is it Behemoth? You'll see her shortly. She's just having a bite to eat. No doubt she will come over and pester me as she likes to do when I'm recording. It's guaranteed almost. No, not even a bite to eat. Straight for the pestering. Come on, Willow. There we are. So we'll sit and have cuddles, and then I'll have to put her down because she does have a tendency to stop the recording by hitting the space bar with her arse. I've got 2 space bars, so she's got a choice. Right, let's read this quote. "Now, this is someone new," said Karoviev, squinting through his lens. "Oh, yes, yes. Azazello once paid him a visit and whispered some advice to him over the brandy on how he could rid himself of a man of whose exposures he was extremely fearful. And so he ordered an acquaintance who was dependent upon him to spray the walls of the man's office with poison." End quote. Off you go. The footnote tells us that the one-time People's Commissar for Internal Affairs, Gigi Yagada, and his secretary, P.P. Bolanov, were accused in their show trial of this crime against Yagada's successor, Yezhov. So we're well into Stalin's Great Terror here. This would have been a sticky passage with the censors for sure. Does it say who these guys were? They were the chiefs of Stalin's secret police. That's who they were. One-time People's Commissar for Internal Affairs. Yeah, chief of secret police. And Yezhov himself was purged, I think, 1938. Let's look that up. He was removed from power in late 1938 and executed in February 1940. So, just shows you, even in a position of power, you can be purged just as easily as anybody else. Right. Margarita is exhausted and in no small amount of pain. However, she's now required to fly around the ballroom so the guests don't feel abandoned. The orchestra has now been replaced by a simian jazz band. There's dancing and a pool that fills with champagne, then brandy. After some time, the ballroom floor clears and a raised dais appears as the clock strikes midnight, which seems strange to Margarita as midnight already chimed hours before. This is explained a bit later. Quote, "But here's what I don't understand. What is all this? It's midnight all the time, but it should already have been morning long ago, shouldn't it?" "It's pleasant just to detain the festive night a little," replied Voland. It reminds me of late nights with my friends playing board games when we wished so much that we could pause time and keep playing. We didn't have Voland at the game, or else we might have been persuaded. Then I've got an image here of me with some friends playing Monopoly round about 1990. There's another raised area opposite, clearly designated for Voland. He makes his entrance accompanied by Abaddona, Azazello and several others resembling Abaddona. Bizarrely, he's still in his dirty nightshirt and slippers, and he's carrying Berlioz's head in a dish. Quote, "Mikhail Alexandrovich," Voland said, addressing the head quietly, and then the eyelids of the man who had been killed were raised a little, and in the dead face Margarita saw with a shudder living eyes, full of thought and suffering. "Everything came true, didn't it?" Voland continued, gazing into the head's eyes. "Your head was cut off by that woman. The meeting didn't take place, and I'm staying in your apartment. That is fact, and fact is the most obstinate thing in the world." End quote. I just love that last line there. Another rapier thrust from Bulgakov into Soviet ideology. Voland raises his sword, whereupon Berlioz's head turns into an ornate goblet shaped from his skull. Just then another guest appears, Baron Miguel. He's been caught out for spying and self-advancement in the real world. Abaddona removes his dark glasses, there's a clap, and Baron Miguel falls backwards with blood gushing from his chest. Voland catches the blood in the Berlioz skull goblet and drinks. As he does so, his dirty nightshirt transforms into a black chlamys. And there's an image here by a different artist, by Nikolai Karolyev, showing Voland in his black chlamys cloak with the skull goblet and offering it to Margarita. It's just a delightful image. It's such a rich novel for artwork. It really is. He passes the goblet to Margarita and instructs her to drink. Quote, "Don't be afraid, my queen. The blood seeped away into the ground long ago, and bunches of grapes already grow in the spot where it was spilt." End quote. She drinks and the ballroom disintegrates around her. She's back in Berlioz's flat. So we've cut short a lot of the description of what happens at the ball. I don't think going into detail in essay form would really be all that interesting. It's much more interesting, I think, if you just read it yourself and enjoy the language, the splendour, the darkness. It's just such an incredible scene of magic realism, I guess you might call it. And we're into chapter 24, the extraction of the master. We're back in Voland's room and he's in his nightshirt. Behemoth pours Margarita a glass of vodka. Voland and his crew hold a debriefing of the ball while enjoying a meal together. Quote, "But tell me," said Margot, who had revived after the vodka, turning to Azazello, "did you shoot him, that ex-baron?" End quote. It's interesting to note here that the narrator refers to Margarita here as Margot. The original is the same. In Russian. "А скажите, обратилась Марго, оживившаяся после водки, к Азазелу, вы его застрелили, этого бывшего барона?" They discuss the shooting of the ex-baron, and then Azazello does a bit of showing off with his marksmanship, hitting a playing card on the spot that Margarita had marked, and which Hela had then hidden under a pillow. Behemoth has a go and messes up big time. He ends up rolling around the floor in a fight with Hela. They kiss and make up. It's rather a playful scene, reminiscent of Found Family. Dawn is approaching and Margarita is starting to come down from her cream-induced high. Her nakedness starts to feel awkward. A feeling of depression comes over her and she just wants to get out of there so that she can drown herself in the river. Yikes! Voland asks her if she has any requests, and she lies, saying no. Quote, "No, nothing, Monsieur," Margarita answered with pride, "except that if you still need me, I am prepared to do anything you like. I'm not in the least tired and had great fun at the ball, so that even if it had carried on for longer, I would have willingly presented my knee for thousands of gallows birds and murderers to kiss." Margarita was gazing at Voland as if through a shroud, and her eyes were filling with tears. End quote. Voland applauds her and tells her that she's passed his test. Quote, "We've been testing you," said Voland. "Never ask for anything, and especially of those who are more powerful than you. They'll make the offer themselves and give everything themselves." End quote. "Go on your cell, hen." Scots for "well done, Margarita." Voland then makes his offer, asking what one thing she desires as a reward for her service as the ball's hostess. She replies that she wishes for, quote, "Frida to stop being given the handkerchief with which she smothered her child," end quote. This harks back to one of the guests at the ball. She killed her newborn illegitimate baby, claiming that she had nothing to feed it with. The footnote tells us that this was based on, quote, "the story of a Swiss seamstress, Frida Keller, as described by the psychologist Auguste Forel, 1848 to 1931, end quote. I've got an image here by Marina Terrods, depicting Frida's kerchief, and it's an engraving. It's really quite something, actually. So yeah, I'd urge you to go and check that out. Voland and his retinue don't take kindly to this act of charity. Margarita explains that she feels she gave Frida hope and is therefore duty-bound to see it through. Voland responds that it's not his department, but that she can grant the request herself. This she does. As Voland did not grant her request, Margarita still has a reward awaiting, so she can express her deepest desire now. Quote, "I want my lover, the master, returned to me at once, this second," said Margarita, her face contorted by a spasm. End quote. The window flies open, and there he is, the master. He's in a bad way, still dressed in his hospital gown and complaining of hallucinations. Voland orders Koroviev to pour the master a drink to steady his nerves. After a second drink, he begins to calm down and explains that he's come from the asylum. Voland asks the master if he knows who he is, to which the master replies in the affirmative, given that Ivan Bezdomny has already explained what went down at Patriarch's Ponds. Voland remembers him. Quote, "He almost drove me myself mad, trying to prove to me that I don't exist." End quote. Voland asks the master where he got his name from, and he replies that Margarita calls him that because she thinks too highly of his novel, the one about Pontius Pilate. This causes an uproar of laughter. You'll recall that it was Voland who had recited the first chapter of the Pilate story, and he asks to see the manuscript. The master explains that this is impossible as he burnt it, to which Roland replies, wait for it, "Manuscripts don't burn." Voland asks Behemoth to pass him the manuscript, and there it is, undamaged. It's a miracle. Only the master doesn't seem too pleased. Quote, "Even at night in the moonlight I have no peace. Why have they disturbed me? Oh, gods, gods." End quote. He has another drink and calms down. Margarita whispers something to him, and he implores her to leave him. The banter between Azazello and Behemoth adds a lot of humour to the scene. "What do you say?" he said, turning to the silent Azazello. "I say," said the latter nasally, "it would be a good thing to drown you." "Be merciful, Azazello," the cat answered him, "and don't give my master that idea. Believe me, I would appear to you every night in just such lunar attire as the poor master, and I'd nod to you and beckon you to follow me. How would you feel about that, oh Azazello?" End quote. Margarita asks Voland to return her and the master to the 2 rooms in the basement and to make everything as it was. The master replies that going back is impossible, but Voland agrees to try. A confused citizen then falls from the ceiling. It's Aloisi Magaric, the man who wrote a complaint about the Master after reading Latunsky's hit piece. He's taken over the Master's 2 rooms in the Arbat. Margarita claws at his face in rage, and he's then borne away through the open window. The Master is worried that he'll be missed at the asylum, whereupon Karoviev produces his case notes and throws them into the fire. Quote, "No document, and there's no person either." End quote. Isn't this just fantastic? Bulgakov is really thumbing his nose at Soviet bureaucracy here, and I love it. They do the same with Aloisi Magaric's tenancy agreement, then with Magaric himself. Documents gone. Poof! What Magaric is that? There was no Magaric. Natasha comes in and implores Margarita to be happy. She'd known all along where Margarita was going. Quote, "Maids know everything," remarked the cat. End quote. Natasha begs to be allowed to remain a witch, and Voland grants her wish. That just leaves Nikolai Ivanovich, who has now been restored to human form. He requests a certificate to confirm his whereabouts last night. It's just so Soviet. Behemoth agrees to make an exception, and Hela types up his certificate. Quote, "I hereby certify that the bearer, Nikolai Ivanovich, spent the night in question at Satan's Ball, being summoned thereto in the capacity of a mode of transport." Put in some brackets, Hela, and in the brackets write, "a hog." Signed, Behemoth. This scene really made me chuckle, especially when Nikolai Ivanovich asks for the certificate to be dated. Quote, "We don't put dates. With a date, the document will become invalid," the cat responded. End quote. Nikolai Ivanovich then disappears to be replaced by Varyanucha. He begs to be allowed to return to how he was before, i.e. not a vampire anymore. Remember that he'd fallen into a faint after Hela's kiss? Karoviev agrees, but only on condition that he cease telling lies over the phone. Voland then asks to be left alone with the Master and Margarita. He asks the Master about his novel, to which the Master replies that it has become hateful to him. Quote, "I've gone through too much because of it." End quote. Could this be Bulgakov's talking about himself? I mean, he spent many years writing The Master and Margarita and didn't live to see it published. I can only imagine that at least sometimes it must have appeared hateful to him. Margarita counters him, saying that she's put too much of her life into the novel, and she begs Voland not to listen to him, reminding us perhaps of Bulgakov's wife, Elena Sergeyevna. Scholars agree that Margarita was modelled on her. Not only that, she provided emotional support for Bulgakov while he was writing the novel, typing and retyping his drafts and encouraging him through censorship traps and despair. It was she who eventually saw the novel's publication in 1966-67 during Khrushchev's thaw, albeit in censored form, 26 years after Bulgakov's death. So, in a sense, Elena Sergeyevna actually turned the phrase "manuscripts don't burn" into reality. Quote, "But you need to be describing something, don't you?" said Voland. "If you've exhausted that procurator, well, start depicting someone else. That Aloisi, for example." End quote. Voland knows that writers going to write. They can't not. The Master disagrees, but I get the feeling that Voland knows better. Voland gives Margarita a parting gift of a horseshoe studded with diamonds. The lovers are escorted out of the flat and down the stairs. As they pass by the second floor landing, the narrator tells us that, quote, "something gave a soft bump, but no one paid it any attention." End quote. Watch this space. They get to the waiting car with the rook chauffeur when Margarita exclaims that she's lost the horseshoe. Azazello goes off to look, whereupon we're introduced to Anushka, the one who spilt the sunflower oil that led to Berlioz's death. She lives in the flat below Berlioz's and bears the nickname Anushka the Plague. Quote, "It was known that wherever she was or wherever she appeared, a ruckus would immediately begin in that place, and apart from that, she bore the nickname the Plague." End quote. Anushka had heard a noise just after midnight and gone out to see what it was. A man came running down the stairs in just his underpants, shouting about the geezer, the vitriol. This would be Aloysey Magaric. He flies off out the window, only to be followed by another man coming out of flat 50, this time Nikolai Ivanovich. He flies out the window as well. Then a third man comes out with a round, shaved face and wearing a Tolstovka, and he too flies out the window. This must be Varyanucha. He was described at the end of chapter 11 as wearing a Tolstovka. She then sees the Master and Margarita coming down, accompanied by Hela, Behemoth and Azazello. As the party passes Anushka's flat, she hears a, quote, soft bump. Aha! She waits till they've passed and then goes out to explore. She finds Margarita's horseshoe wrapped in a napkin. She hides it in her bosom just before Azazello appears before her, asking that she return it. She claims not to have found anything, so Azazello strangles her into submission, then gives her 200 rubles as a reward for finding it. We have an image here of Azazello holding Anushka up against the wall with his hand on her neck. Image by Gennady Kalinovsky. It might seem like a rather strange and gratuitous scene, but Bulgakov uses it to illustrate a couple of things. First of all, it grounds us in Moscow after the supernatural ball upstairs. Anushka presents as Moscow rules: greed, opportunity, lies, corruption. She sees the horseshoe, a symbol of luck, and pockets it. Then, when confronted, she lies. She's like the audience at the theatre, further evidence that Moscow hasn't changed internally. Contrast Anushka with Margarita, who endures pain and suffering without complaint, then asks for mercy for Frida instead of a reward for herself. The supernatural doesn't replace human pettiness, it exposes it. Then I've got an image here of the party going down to the car outside, another one by Gennady Kalinovsky. The party say their goodbyes and the retinue disappears as the rook-driven car whisks the Master and Margarita off to the basement flat in the Arbat. The Master sleeps while Margarita fingers the notebook containing the manuscript. The chapter ends with the first line of the next chapter as Margarita reads from the end of the Master's novel. Chapter 25, How the Procurator Tried to Save Judas of Kiriath. This is the third of 5 Yerushalayim chapters. The city is enveloped in fog. There's a thunderstorm amidst a hurricane. Weather motifs echo the Procurator's mood. He's lying on a couch and there's a smashed wine jug at his feet with a pool of red wine on the floor. The storm eventually passes. The description of the storm and the palace, along with the Procurator's mood, is in a very different style from the Moscow chapters. It's more descriptive than we're used to in the Moscow chapters. The Procurator is waiting for the hooded man whom he met in a dark room before passing sentence on Yeshua, the same man who had sat on the three-legged stool as the order was given to put the captives out of their misery with a spear. He arrives and the two of them enjoy a meal and wine together before getting down to business. Then I've got an image here of the two men enjoying wine before getting down to business. It's by Gennady Kalinovsky once again. Quote, "And so," Pilate began softly, "what can you tell me about the mood in this city?" "I think, Procurator," his guest replied, "that the mood in Yerushalayim is now satisfactory." End quote. The Procurator goes on to complain about how much he hates Yerushalayim and how he longs to return to Caesarea, founded by Herod the Great to honour Augustus Caesar at 22 to 10 BC, today a national park between Tel Aviv and Haifa. The Procurator mentions a Messiah that the city's people have been waiting for. It's interesting to note that the idea of Yeshua's being that Messiah is not mentioned in the story. This is not the Jesus that we know from the Gospels. They discuss the freed criminal Bar Rabban. The head of the secret police informs the Procurator that the criminal is under surveillance and he needn't worry. They discuss the death of the 3 prisoners and the hooded man explains that Yeshua had refused a drink and had gone on to state that he held no grudges for his death and that the most important of human vices was cowardice. It would appear that he was referring to the procurator. Remember that discussion we had about how it was his cowardice that led to his decision to pass the death sentence? The procurator praises the chief of the procurator of Judea's secret service, for so he is named finally, and asks that, if offered promotion in another city, he reject it and be, quote, rewarded in some other way, end quote. To this the chief agrees. He then goes on to tell the procurator that Judas of Kiriath is due to be paid an unknown sum of money at Caiaphas' palace in return for his betrayal of Yeshua. Remember that Caiaphas is the high priest and serves the church, the procurator's equal in rank. The procurator refers to the chief as Afranius. We have a name at last. A footnote informs us that, quote, one Afranius Burrus carried out police duties as Praetorian prefect of Rome, dying in 62 AD. The procurator informs Afranius that he's heard a rumour that Judas is going to be murdered that night. He won't reveal a source, but goes on to say that the money will be returned to the high priest. It will cause a, quote, very great scandal, end quote. Afranius is given instructions to bury the 3 bodies from the execution secretly, so that they may be forgotten, and to prevent the murder of Judas. He takes his orders and retires. And that's where we leave it, to be heading into the next chapter, which is going to continue with the Yerushalayim sequence of stories. And that takes us to the end of this week's instalment. What do you reckon? That ball scene is one of the quintessential moments of the whole novel. A pivotal moment, you might say. And I love the way that we get a reconciliation between the Master and Margarita. Because remember, in fact, that Margarita herself didn't even appear in the novel until the second half. And yet the novel is named after her and the Master. Now it's kind of really taken on her story in a big way, and she's such an excellent character. You know, the way that she sacrifices herself for her love, and the way that she's not corrupt, in the way that Anushka is corrupt, in the way that the audience in the variety theatre was corrupt. She's more of a pure soul, and it makes me think that there's going to be a happy ending for her. I mean, I do know, obviously, having read it before, but this is how I would be thinking. Although, can one think what one would have thought had one not read the novel before? I don't know. That's a philosophical question, a metaphysical question. What do you think, reader, especially those of you who haven't read it before? Do you think there's a happy ending in store for Margarita? What about the Master? And what about the other characters? Ivan Biezdomny, for instance. How do you see his end in the story? Curious to hear your thoughts, so give it some thought and let me know in the comments. That would be interesting. So that's us at the end of this week's instalment. Join next week when we'll be reading up to chapter 29, to be read by the 19th of February. So that means 26, 27 and 28. 3 chapters again. Starting, as I said, with the burial. We're in Yerushalayim. And then onwards to see where we go after that. And following that, we've got one more instalment to go, so we're getting close to the end. I have in my mind that I would like to do a Zoom call for paid subscribers. So I'll come up with a date and I'll put that down in the Substack post before I put it out. And I'll put a link in the description of the video in case that's your primary means of consumption. But of course you can always go and check the Substack essay to get the details, but I will of course announce it in next week's video as well, because I'll have chosen a date by then. I did do something similar at the end of The White Guard, and it was very fruitful. What I will say is that I don't want this to be just for people who think they know the novel outside in, or inside out if you're in England. Did you know that that was a wee quirk of Scots that we say outside in? I want this to be for everyone, so even if you feel that you've got nothing to contribute, I know some people get nervous coming on video. You can sit in the background with your camera off and just listen into the conversation. Although I really would love to see you. I'd love to meet my subscribers and get to know you a bit better, so keep that in mind, and if you can, come along. I imagine it's going to be on a Sunday. Let me think, when will we be finishing this read along? The first Sunday in March, I want to say. In fact, I could open up my calendar now and just pin it down while I'm on camera, since I'm at my computer anyway. So the first Sunday in March is going to be Sunday the 1st of March. And the read along will be finishing on the 26th of February. So it doesn't give you much time. Let's say, am I away? Yeah, I'm away on Saturday the 7th of March, but I should be back that night, which means, yeah, let's say the 8th. Alright, Sunday the 8th of March, 6 p.m. UK time. So that's GMT or UTC. I'll just put that in my calendar now. Master and Margarita Zoom, and time 1800. Boom. And there, it's done. It's on the calendar. So if you can put that in your calendar, if you're free and you would like to come along and chat with me and other members of my Substack who have read the book, for paid subscribers only, I'm afraid to say, but that's just how it goes. And when the call is over, I do intend to put it out as a video for paid subscribers to watch after the fact. So bear that in mind if you are thinking of coming along. Yeah, see you all next week. Thanks for watching and or listening and or reading. Za mną czytatel. Follow me, reader. See you next week. Bye.